Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts, and today I pulled out the Simple Stories Seichi's Wild collection, as well as a sketch from the Sketchbook using 6x6 pattern papers from the creative design team. In this layout, I'm going to be documenting some photos of Eli and myself at Animal Kingdom picking up our Passholder magnets. Now, you guys know that I have been trying really hard not to use white cardstock. So I originally started out with this layout by using this orange cardstock. And things go very, very wrong. So buckle up because this one's going to be an adventure. I actually don't use a lot of the pieces from this collection. I picked this up because I was super excited when Simple Stories announced that they had a kind of park theme collection. They had one for each one of the parks, as well as Magic Kingdom had a couple of extra ones. It is very specific, but it is also a mini kit, so there's not really a lot of papers. I ended up pulling quite a bit from my stash, especially with the cardstock. For the banners, which there's going to be big, large banners on both the left and right hand side of the layout, and you may have guessed based on the sketchbook's name that it is only using 6x6 papers. I'm actually going to end up using 12x12 paper, but this is a great way to use up scraps, use up the 6x6, or to save a lot of paper. So basically the sketch calls for the dovetail banners to be on the very far left and far right of the layout. And then in the center, you have these strips that make it look like the banner has gone across the entire layout. In theory, that is an amazing idea. I don't know if it was user error or book error, but I'm definitely going to struggle with this layout. The first struggle that I'm going to have is that the sketch called for the photos to be cut down and then matted on 4x6. So I figured I would use my background paper and mat my photos on the orange. And then I didn't think about the fact that I was going to have space between them. So I'm going to get both of these photos matted, and I'm also going to struggle with getting them straight, and you'll see that here in a bit. So for the inner part of the left-hand side of the layout, it calls for 1-inch strips to go from the very edge of the paper to right behind the photos. Then on the right-hand side of the layout, you're going to have the two photos, one on top of each other. You're going to have that pattern paper in the center, again with the 1 inch. And then you're also going to have another two photos on the right-hand side. Now, I did use the Canva app to put two 3x4 photos on a 4x6. So I was actually able to get 4 photos on the very far right-hand side. I'm actually going to be able to get 10 photos on this layout because I also have a 2x3 photo that I'm going to add later on. Now, you guys know that I love to gut my paper, and sometimes I'll go to an extreme. This was definitely an extreme, and I am going to struggle so much. So here you can see that I need to put my 1-inch strips down, and I'm going to do it wrong because technically the photo is supposed to go all the way to the edge. I get the green paper as well as that cream paper down. Then I realize that I just don't have enough paper to adhere it to. So I pull out a piece of white copy paper. And in theory, this idea would have worked. In reality, it did not. And it's actually going to end up being completely scrapped. But that's okay, because there's no mistakes in scrapbooking, just ways to embellish. Or at least that's what I keep telling myself. Now, this was the last layout that I completed before I took a small little break. You guys did not see any type of break with the content that I was creating, but you may remember a few videos ago I had mentioned that I was struggling. And I will tell you that this layout was the layout that broke me. I mentioned it on the most recent podcast that there was a layout that I cried through, and this was the layout. It was the layout that I knew if I did not take a break and step away, that I would not come back. And so at this point, I'm like, yep, we're not using that orange paper at all. We're going to try to use this brown paper. And it doesn't go well either. You guys had some great suggestions on that video where I talked about that I was struggling. And I took a lot of it to heart. But I'm also the type of person that likes to push through things and get things done. But sometimes life has different plans. There was something that happened personally that I had to deal with. Scrapbooking had to take a backseat. It was almost like life was telling me, if you're not willing to take a break, if you're willing to cry through layouts and struggle and continue to push through, then I'm going to find a way. And boy, did it. So a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, I had to take a break, whether I wanted to or not. Then Thanksgiving hit, and all of the things that happen around the holidays, it got really hard to get into my scrapbook room. But now that Thanksgiving's over, obviously we're moving into Christmas, so I will have a lot of catching up to do, because I like to be a little bit ahead when it comes to content creating and scheduling my videos. At this point, I am not ahead at all, but that's okay, because I feel like I have been renewed a little bit, and I'm excited to get back into my scrapbook room and start creating again. So let's see where this journey takes us. So I decided that the orange paper was not going to work for me. I had matted my photos individually, but I was going to have the issue of not being able to cover up the strips of banners between the photos. So I decided that I would mount my two photos together on the brown paper. And of course, I'm going to struggle with this as well. For whatever reason, my layer guides did not cut my layers straight. So I'm going to get it down, but definitely going to struggle. While I'm doing that, let me tell you a little bit about these photos. Like I said, these are photos of Eli and myself at Animal Kingdom. One of the perks of being a pass holder is that they often offer pass holder magnets. Several years ago, those pass holder magnets were round, and they had a character on the round part of the magnet. You always got the orange Mickey one when you renewed your pass, but then they started coming out with other characters to include Minnie and Daisy, Donald, and all the Fab Fives. Then they switched over to the letter D for Disney with Mickey in the center of it. And then every once in a while, we will get the opportunity to head over to the parks to pick up a special magnet that has different characters. For this magnet, it was Timon and Pumba. When we went to pick up the magnets, the cast member had displayed the magnets in a really fun way. They had spelled out AP, standing for annual pass holders, with a little heart in the center. And then they had also made a Mickey head with them. So of course I had to take a picture of it. And then of course we had to stop by the PhotoPass photographer to get a picture in front of the log that has Timon, Pumbaa, and Simba. We had to display our pass holder magnets as well as give our most vicious roar. I definitely gave a vicious roar. Eli looks like he is not pleased to be at Disney at all. I did pull out this Omni ruler, again trying to figure out how to use it. I am not ever successful with it, but I'm going to keep trying, because one day it's going to click in my brain and I will finally figure out how to use this thing. I did finally get my lines on the paper so that I could cut out my banner. Once I got my banner cut out, I just used the scrap piece to make some pencil lines on the other piece so I could cut out the second banner. I'm going to do the same thing for the yellow paper as well as the cream paper. And you can see how the 1-inch squares on the right hand side are going to be covered up with the two photos, and then I'm going to have those banners over on the left. While we were at Animal Kingdom, of course, we had to pick up some dinner. We stopped by Flame Tree Barbecue, and I ended up getting the chicken, and Eli ended up with the ribs. He is always going to choose ribs when we have barbecue. After dinner, we headed over to the Trilobites kiosk to pick up our annual pass holder exclusive Dole Whip treat. This float consisted of orange flavored Dole Whip swirled with Fanta orange soda with the addition of wild berry syrup, and it was topped with a white chocolate Rafiki character medallion. And these types of adventures is one of the many things that I love about being a Disney pass holder. We went over there, picked up our magnet, got a few pictures, had dinner and dessert, and headed home. So as you can see, my layout is finally coming together. I've got my banners on the left-hand side of the layout. I've added my two photos to the right-hand side. And then the sketch calls for a 1-inch piece of paper in the center. And then over on the far right-hand side, I'm going to add 3 more banners. Once I get the banners down, you're going to be able to see that the banners look like it spans across the entire layout. As I was putting this layout together, I was definitely frustrated, like I mentioned before, but I do remember thinking after I got all of the stitching down on this layout that it really was worth it. It turns out pretty awesome. This is where I'm going to add that one additional photo. I sized it down to a 2x3, and I'm going to add it up in the upper right hand corner next to the picture of our Dole Whip float. I'm then going to pull this ruler out once again so that I can draw my pencil lines. Like I've said before, I enjoy using the Tim Holtz Media Ruler when I'm drawing straight lines. But for this one, because I had to come to the point of the banners, I knew that I wasn't going to get it straight. I didn't even get it straight when I was drawing the straight line on the side of the layout. Good thing I used the pencil so that I could erase it. I'm going to add stitching to all 3 of the banners. And I remember when I was drawing the lines, I was really clear about where the stitching marks needed to be, especially for the green and cream color paper. The yellow paper lays on top of it, so of course I'm going to have stitching on that one. But the green and the cream colored paper, it is behind the yellow. So in between the 2 strips of photos on the right, I only had stitching on the yellow. But then when I went to stitch it, I was like, oh man, I missed a section. And I'm glad that I took a second to look at it once I finished stitching, because I would have been pretty upset had I poked holes and actually stitched on the green and the cream colored paper. Once I got all of the holes poked, I will then erase the pencil lines, and I did my stitching off camera. I slowed the video down here so that you can see all of that amazing detail. And I will tell you that the stitching is what brings this layout together. The sketch does not call for stitching, but I cannot imagine what this layout would be without it. Now it's time to embellish. And like I said, this kit is super cute. I love the fact that it is very specific to Animal Kingdom, but it's also kind of generic. I like the title of So Wild, but it really didn't go with the photos. I even thought about using the smaller wild from the foam stickers, but ultimately it just wasn't working for me. So I decided that I would leave the wild on the backing and add it to my layout so that I could figure out what I wanted to do. I pulled out my dies and decided that my title was going to be Wild Passholders. And since I went with the smaller, thinner, scripty font for the word passholder, I decided I would go ahead and use the larger word wild with all of the animal prints. And I'm really glad that I did, because I feel like that wild piece against the green cardstock with the orange passholder underneath it was just a perfect touch. I did end up using the orange paper that I totally messed up at the beginning of this layout, so at least not everything was lost. I also cut out a couple of Mickey heads to add around the layout, and once I got the word passholder down on my mat, I realized that I spelled passholder and not passholders with an S, and there are 2 of them, so I had to bring out my dies again and cut 3 additional S's so that I could use Nicole's sticker technique to stack up those titles and make the perfect title of Wild Passholders. I'm going to go ahead and get that word passholders down. I did use my Xyron machine because these letters are super tiny and really thin. But look how that orange pops off the green. I then decided to pull out my fun foam and added some of that behind the word wild so that I could give it some real dimension right next to the word passholder. Of course, adding my stamping block on top of that so that it would adhere properly to the layout. I also decided that I would use some fun foam on my photo on the right hand side just to give it a little bit of dimension next to those 2 photos. I'm not going to add a whole lot of embellishments to this layout, mainly because I really want those banners to be the focal point. So I had to make sure that I included something to represent Timon and Pumba, and of course that meant Hakuna Matata. So I headed over to Kelly Bell Designs to pick up the Lion King Festival word flare. With the word flare, I was able to pick up the orange tag that says "It means no worries," as well as the flare that says Hakuna Matata. I did cut that flare out in a 1-inch circle so that I could add it to my bottle caps. And I love the yellow background of the word flare against that red bottle cap. It just works perfectly. I tucked a little leaf behind it as well as a little floral on top. And I really like the florals from this collection. I just think that it works so well with the animal print embellishments from this collection. So of course I'm going to add those florals to each one of my embellishment clusters. Got one on the upper left, one down there near my title, and then one on the upper right. I also knew that I wanted to pull in some of the word phrases from the sticker sheet. I was able to find one that says Circle of Life. I added that over on the right-hand side of the layout. And then I'm going to do what I normally do and cut out journaling strips for my journaling. But I had a lot to say. So I end up adding all of these journaling strips together. I stack them 3 high. I trim them down. And then I have no place to put them on my layout. You see over there on the left, I still have another 3 strips. So I ultimately decided that the journaling strips were not going to work. I ended up printing out my journaling on vellum, and I'm going to add it over on the left-hand side of the layout to that yellow banner. So as I get that down, let me just read my journaling to you. It says, collecting Passholder magnets has become my little obsession. Eli pretends he doesn't care, but he never turns down a Disney food bribe, and I'm not above using that to my advantage. We headed into Animal Kingdom on a mission, because the new Timon and Pumba magnet was calling my name. The cast member even arranged the magnets into a Mickey head and a giant AP. After claiming our magnets, we followed the smell of barbecue to Flame Tree and finished with a Passholder exclusive Rafiki's Wildberry and Dole Whip orange float. Another magnet for the fridge and another Disney day with my favorite sidekick. Worth it every time. I decided to pull out the adhesive brads and add those around the layout as well. And then I was able to find a little Dole Whip drink as well as a camera. And I wasn't really liking my title. I felt like it needed something else. So I went back to my alphabet dies and I'm going to spell out the word go. Again, stacking it up 3 times. My title is now Go Wild Passholders. And that was definitely inspired by the photo on the right of us with our best roar face. Or at least mine. I don't think Eli's best roar face is there. I also ended up adding those orange Mickey heads that I cut out. And then I'm going to pull out my color boxes in brown and red and add them around the layout. I did use some adhesive brads as well as some stickers to make sure that my vellum was adhered to my layout. And then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I hope you guys enjoyed this one as I struggled through it, but it definitely turned out amazing. All right, if you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.